This conference will now be recorded.
Lavanya will be taking the questions at the last stage. So sorry, after the class. Okay. So today in today's class, we are going to see the new concept called as your classes. So this is the original format how we used to write in your organizations. So whatever the things which you have seen before are the basics for your classes. Whatever you have seen before are the basics for your classes. Now, as I as I told, so the classes is a framework which will contain the attributes, the methods, the types, the events for a particular business entity or for a particular business scenario. So now, if you are manufacturing a car, the shape of the car will always be a different between the type to model, but some of the few components like your tires, so your steering, your AC, your seats, these are generic components which will be used in every car. So now, so that generic things we will be just going and create a class. A class. So that's what I told you. For a business, for a particular business entity or a particular business scenario. Now my business scenario is a car. A car which will have the common components, will just go ahead and create a class. So now, if I compare this a class with your function module, so every function module will contains a function group, right? That function group is equal to class. Every function module will contains a function group. That function group is equal to your class. I'm just giving you a brief, but these are different. So to make you understand it in a better way, I was just telling you. Every function module is equal to your method. So a class contains the methods. Now, where you will be creating your types declaration and data declaration in your function group? In your top include. In the top include, it's mainly used to create your types declaration as well as the data declaration. Now, in order to create your types declaration, you will be having your types. In order to create your data declaration, you will be having your attributes. The attributes will go ahead and create your data declarations on your constant declaration. I didn't tell you about the constants till now. I'm going to show you now. The constants declaration, the methods are equal to like your function modules, which will have the importing, exporting, the changing parameters, and you would be having your tables. In the function modules, you will be having your tables parameter, but I told you tables parameters are obsolete. How can you convert that? You have to create your table types. You have to create your table types. Now that table types, you have to use it in your classes. And here, apart from this importing, exporting, and changing, you will be seeing a returning parameter. Returning parameter, so which is like as you are exporting only, which is like as you are exporting only, the same way the returning parameter is. Now, the transaction code for your for creating of your class is either you can do it with your help of your SE24 or you can do it with your help of your SE38. So whenever you are creating a class in SE24, that is called as your global class. Whenever you are creating a class in your SE38, that is called as your local class. So when you created a global class, you can use them in wherever you want. Whether you want in one or another class, if I want to use it, you can go ahead and use that. In your programs, you can go ahead and use it. In your scripts or in your smart forms or in your module pool, wherever you want, you can go ahead and use that one. Whereas these local classes are only applicable for that particular program or the include program, the sub programs which we have been used in that program. So include programming, as I told you. So include programming or nothing but your sub programs, what you are going to call. Inside subprograms, you can go ahead and call this classes. So that is the difference between your global class and a local class. A global class is when you are creating a class in SE24. The local class is whenever you are creating a class in SE38. Now, creation of your class. How can you create your class? A class is created as a two-step procedure, like your subroutine. So subroutine definition and subroutine implementation. In the same way, for your class also, it's a two-step procedure. The class definition and your class implementation. In the class definition, you will be providing the types declarations, the data declarations, as well as your method names. Method names, like your subroutine name. So you will be creating your subroutine name, and then inside your form and end form, you will be writing your corresponding code, right? In the same way, here also, you will be just creating your complete data declarations, your constant declarations, your types declaration, your table types declaration, everything you will be doing in your classes. The methods what you have created, in order to implement those methods, that means you have to write down your ABAP code that you will be doing in your class implementation. Your class implementation. The syntax is class, the name of your class and definition, and then you will be writing your end class. Now, the subroutine is perform the subroutine name, and then form the subroutine name and end form. Here also you will be having class, class name, implementation, and end class. End class. This is how you have to create your classes. Now, how to call your class? So I have created my class. I want to call the class. So in order to call your class, you need to create an object. So the next thing we are going to see is object. Objects are nothing but the instance of your class. That means objects will assign the memory. Like if I want to go ahead and create a data declaration, what the data declaration will do, it will assign a memory of type what you provided, right? So it will assign, if I say cat10, the field name will be contains of your cat10. That means the length of that field is 10-digit character which can hold 10 digit of length, which can hold the data. The memory it will be gets assigned. So now when you create a class, it will just create, in order to use the class in your programs or inside your class, inside your subclass or inside your program, you need to create an object. Objects are nothing but your instances of your class. So that means it will assign your memory. So how many objects you can create? So you can create n number of objects inside your class. Each object creation will have its own memory. Like in your each data declaration will have its own memory, right? In the same way, each object will also contains its own memory, and its own attributes. Now, to create this object, we have to use a word called as the create object. We have to use a keyword called as the create object. So I was telling you, there is a class already created. I am going to assign a memory in my program. So in order to assign a memory in your program, you need to create a object. So this object must be referred to this class. So if I go here, I have a class like this. I want to call this class in your ABAP program. So you have to create your object. So this object you have to refer to this class. This object you have to refer to this class. Once you are referring to this, then the memory, the components which you have, like your attributes, like your constant declaration, like your methods, will be assigned in memory. That means you can use them in your program. You can start using them in your program. Now, in the same way, for your function modules. So you will be calling the function module and you will be assigning your declarations. The data declarations which you have created, you will be assigning that. Now the data will be gets transported to that. Now, so this function module will automatically assign the memory, but for a class method, or if I want to call a method of the class or anything in that class, so you have to create, you have to, first of all, you have to assign a memory to that class. So how can you assign that? With the help of your object, with the help of your object. So this is a two-step procedure also. The first one is you need to create a data declaration, type reference to, this is a keyword. So if I want to refer to your class, then you have to use your type reference to. So this is what, and then you have to create the object. Then you have to create. Once you have done these two things, then the memory will be gets allocated. Then the memory will be gets allocated to that particular class or to that particular object. This is how you have to call your class inside a class. I mean, if you are doing, I have a class 1, I want to call the class 1 in class 2, or I want to call that in your SAP, or I want to call that in your scripts, or I want to call that in your smartphones, or I want to call that in your Adobe forms, or I want to call that in your module pool. Wherever you want to call this class 1, this is the syntax you have to use. So how many objects I can create for a class? I can create n number of objects. No restrictions for that. So each object will have its own memory. Now, what are the properties of your class? What are the properties of your class? So the components, sorry, what are the components of your class? The class components are, the first one is your properties, the second one is your interface, the third one is your friends, the fourth one is your attributes, the fifth one is your methods, the sixth one is your events, the seventh one is your types, and the eighth one is your aliases. So these are the components, or these are the components of your class. So what are the components? So that means what are the sub things that are available in your classes? The first one is your properties, the interfaces, the friends, and then attributes, methods, events, types, and aliases. So how can you see that? If I go to SE24, sorry. Let me log on to SAP. So now I'm just going to log on. Now, what is the transaction code for creating of your class? SE24. So now I'm going to SE24. Now here I'm going to create my class name. So GCL has to always starts with GCL. Standard classes of SAP will always start with the CL, but for your custom created class, you have to always start with GCL. If you are not going to start with GCL, 7 AM, let's say class. So now if I say click on create, it will open a pop-up window saying that whether you want to whether you want to create a class or whether you want to create an interface. Whether you want to create a class or whether you want to create an interface. But when you write this as GCL, it won't ask you. SAP will go ahead and always create it as class. Sorry, GCL underscore. Then it will go ahead and create your class GCL. I'll just go ahead and take this as 9 AM class. So I'll just go ahead and click on create. Now it won't show you that pop-up. It won't show you that pop-up. Now in this you have to provide your description. So 9 AM class, and just don't check anything. Don't do anything. Just create this. I'm going to tell you about your exception class, what is meant by this persistence class, and what is meant by this final class at a later point of time. So don't do anything. Just click on save. It will ask you for your package. Just provide your package as well as your TR. Just provide your package as well as your TR. So once you provide it, then you will be entering and seeing your components. Then you will be entering and seeing your components. So now you can see the same screenshot which I have attached over here. The properties, the interfaces, the friends, the attributes. See the properties, the interfaces, the friends, the attributes, the methods, events, types, and aliases. Now, coming to these properties. So these properties will tell us when it has been created, who has been created, what is your package name, when it has been last changed, whether you have to check the fixed automatic and Unicodes. This you have seen in your SP38 program. We have already discussed, and you can see something called as your superclass, your inheritance, and your change inheritance concept. So we will be going and see what is meant by the superclass at a later point of time. We will be going and seeing about this superclass at a later point of time, and what is the type of your class. The type of your class is your final class. The type of your class is nothing but your final class. So we have selected this and we are providing your description. Okay, so what is this final class? This we will be going to see once we go into deep dive of your classes. Okay, now these are nothing but your attributes. So now you see here I have just written this, and the next one is the interface. What is meant by this interface? So interface are nothing but this is also one type of a class. Interfaces are also a one type of a class, but the class in that you will be having the method without implementation. The code will not be gets implemented in your interface. I can say interface is nothing but a dummy class. Interface is nothing but your dummy class. If you are creating a class, if you have a method, that method has to be implemented. Whereas in your interface, you won't be implementing your methods over there, but you have to call this interface over here and you can implement that. You can implement that. Like your car. If I take it as a car, so now depends upon the type of your version. Let's say the car will have an AC. So if you are going to the top model, you will be getting an auto climate control. Whereas if you go to the lower versions, it's a manual AC control. Now the AC is the same, but how you are configuring. So how you are writing, whether you want to use a manual AC or whether you want to use an automatic climate control, automatic climate AC. So depends upon the version type. So now I will be going and creating an interface for AC, and I will be calling that in my classes. And if it is a manual, I will write the code for the manual. If it is an automatic, I write the code for my automatic in my class. So that's called as your interface. Wherever you want, you can go ahead and call that interface, and you can write your own logic. Your own logic. So which will have the methods without implementation. The interfaces which will contains the methods without implementation. Okay, so how to create this interface and how to call this interface we will be seeing in your upcoming classes. The next one is your friends class. This I will teach you at a later point of time. And the next one is your attributes, where you have to provide your data declarations, where you have to provide your data declarations, and then the methods which will contains, it is like as your function modules, the function modules, and then events. So like your interactive reporting. So you'll be having your event, right? So you can write the code on for your events. So in this, you can create your own events, but when you are going with your reuse ALV, you can't able to create your event. But here you can create your own event and you can write your own logic. You can write your own logic. That's the advantage of going with your classes. So events in normal reporting are only restricted, but when you're going to classes, the events you can write n number of events. You can write your own code or you can just call the existing events. which are there in your standard classes. So you can write, you can create your own events. You can. So that's the main advantage for going with your classes. That's the main one advantage. Apart from this, you do have other advantages also, which we are going to see. The next one is your types. So if you want to create your own types declaration and your table types declaration, you will be creating the types declaration over here. The next one is your aliases. So like your joins, we have used the alias. VBAK as A, VBAP as B, the shortcut names. So you can provide your aliases over here. You can provide your aliases. So these are the components of your class. The same thing I have written. So met interfaces. It is also one type of a class where we will be create only the definition and the implementation. We will do it. The implementation we will do it in the class where we are going to use these interfaces. We'll implement in the normal ABAP class. Okay. Next attributes, here we will be declaring your data declarations and your constant declaration. So methods, it will contains the block of ABAP code, the block of ABAP code, some functionality for the class. These are similar like your function module. In this method, we can access all the attributes of your class, every attributes of your class, like your top declarations which you have created in your function group, you can access in function module, right? In the same way, the attributes which you have created in your class, you can able to access it. We can create our own parameters for your methods, similar to like your function module. Here you will be having your importing, exporting, changing, and returning parameters. We will be defining the method in your class definition, and the exact code of the method we'll be writing it in your class implementation. Exact code we'll be writing in your class implementation. If you wish to call a method in your program, so that means you have created your object. The thing is, if I go ahead and open your page, I have a class 1 which will contains a method 1 and a method 2. Class 1 which will contains. Now I want to call the method 1 of this class in my SE38. My SE38 program, I want to call the class 1 and its method M1. Class 1 and its method M1. How to do that? First thing is you need to go ahead and create data obj type a reference to class 1, and then the second step is create object, and then you will be writing your obj. Now the memory will be assigned. Now in order to call my method, we have to use a syntax called as the call method. So what is my object? Obj hyphen your m1. Obj hyphen your m1. Or there is one more syntax. So you will be having like this also. So but here you will be writing your class 1 double quotation. So when to use this and when to use this, we are going to see this. But if I want to call a method, you have to use a call method, and you have to call either from your class name is equal to this parameter, or with your object and this one. When to use this one and when to use this one, we'll be going and seeing in your upcoming slides. So there you will be having something called as the instance and the static. So at that time, I'll be going to tell you how to call your instance and how to call your static. Okay. So now events. So events are the actions that are going to perform by the user. We can create an event. So once you create an event, so that means in your function modules, how you will be writing. So you will be So in your function module, you will be using reuse ALV events get. This is what we are going to use this function module, and you will be filling an internal table called as IT events. And then you will be using a read table, and you will be providing the form name, right? You will be providing your form name, and you have to write the code in your form and end form. So this is what you are going to do in case of your use ALV. But when you are trying to use this, so first of all, you need to define your event. You need to define your event, and then you need to write the code in the method. So everything, and then link this event and method, so that whenever the action has been performed, this method will be gets called. In your subroutine also, whenever the action has been performed, sorry, in your ALV also, whenever the action has been performed, this subroutine will be gets called. Here also, whenever the action has been performed, this method will go ahead and call. So this is what, this is a three-step procedure. Here also it's a three-step procedure only. Here also it's a three-step procedure. So we will be seeing in detail when we go ahead and start with your events. When we go ahead and start with your events. The next one is, so see, that's what. So we need to link this event to a method for writing the business logic. So what logic it has to be performed? What logic it has to be performed? We have to go ahead and write the business logic. The next one is types. Here we will be declaring the types declaration and your table types, aliases, providing a shortcut name to your class or a interfaces which we are going to use. So inside a class, we can call a class 1. So if I have a class 2, I want to call class 1, you can call that. But if you want to call an interface I1 or I2, you can call your interfaces 2. Okay, so for that, if I want to provide an aliases name, you can just go ahead and provide that in your aliases. This is also one of your interview question. So what is meant by this aliases? What is meant by this aliases? So aliases, this is also an interview question. As I told you, if you have an experience in classes, they can ask you a number of questions. If you doesn't have an experience in classes, they won't consider your resume. They won't consider your resume. Okay, they won't. They won't consider your resume. If you have a classes, if you told that you have a classes experience, they can ask you any number of questions. So, but you have to tell that I have an experience in classes only in order to consider your resume, because the OData services will use as a classes, the RAP technology will use as a classes, the BSP components will use as a classes, the BTP components will use as a classes, the AMDP processes will use as a classes. Everything, if it has to support an UI, if it has to support any front-end application, everything you have to write down in the form of your classes only. Everything you have to write down in the classes only. This is a base for everything. So that's what I told you. If you doesn't say I don't have an experience in classes, then your resume will never get considered. Okay, remember that. But if you say an experience in classes, they can ask you for 1 hour also. Only on classes, almost they can ask you 45 minutes to 1 hour. So many number of questions. They can twist the same question in 4 to 5 days. They can twist the same question in 4 to 5 days. So same way, what is meant by aliases? So I want to provide a shortcut for my interface or a class where you can provide alias. The same question I twisted in 2 ways. So like that, they can twist the question in how many different ways they want. So try to learn the classes more and more. Okay, try to learn the classes more and more. From here onwards, whatever the program you're going to write, everything you have to write down in the form of your classes only. If you're writing in a traditional way, like how we have written in your subroutines, we will never ever accept your code. We will never ever accept your code. So till now, whatever you learn, so except so the previous the 8 o'clock batch, except baddies, backies, and everything. So whatever you have learned in your reporting is your basic. Is your basic. So the exact format we are going to write in your classes only. The complete coding you have to write down in your classes only. You should not write anything in your traditional way, like your subroutines, the performs, everything are gone. So if you are, but you know the concept because you have to know them also, because there are clients who are with SAP from past 30 years. So people at that time they have used the subroutines. They have used the subroutines. But when you are writing your own code or when you are doing your scratch implementation, so you have to write your code in the form of your classes only. So that's why this is most important concept, guys. Please don't miss any class for the next upcoming 1 week or maybe 1.5 weeks. So please don't miss any of your classes, any of these sessions. I would say the topic which we are going to see on the classes. Don't miss any topic. Okay, somehow try to join as soon as possible so that we won't miss even one single statement. You can say that we do have the recording, that's fine. So that's apart from you, that's okay, but the class format will always a class format compared to your recording. Okay, so anyways, so this is the most important topic. Now, the next thing we are going to see a level of your attribute slash your what is the main functionality, why we are going to go ahead with your classes. The first thing is we can have n number of events. You can define your own event and you can write your own code. Okay, so that's the main purpose. That's why, so let's say in your UI application, the user has triggered a button. It has to go ahead and do the following code, right? It has to go ahead and do the following code. So that button, it can be a standard button or you can create your own custom button. If I say I have created a own custom thing, then you can go ahead and write down the code what is it to say? In your method. You can go ahead and write down the code in your method. So that's what. So however you want. So that's the main reason the classes has been came up to support your front end. The web-based application. The web-based application, if it has to support it, you have to write down the code in the form of your classes only. Whether it can be a BSP applications, that means your webline pro, or whether it can be a OData services, or whether it can be as proxies, or whether it can be a wrap, or whether it can be anything. Anything you have to write down in the form of your classes only. Okay, so that's what. Now, so the importance is we can write your own, customize your own UI based upon however you want. And the next one is the security. The security. Okay, so now I'm typing my password. It has to show only in the form of your asterisks. How can you do that? So that is what. That security purposes you can do it in your classes, which you can't able to do that in your traditional programming. Your traditional programming you can't able to do that. Okay, so that's how the security is. Now in this you will be having two types of instances. So the level of attributes slash methods, you will be having two types of levels. One is your instance and one is your static. I told you you can call this method in this two ways. So this is called as an instance, and this is called as, yeah, static. Static. This is called as your instance, and this is called as your static. Now, instance, the instance component, the component which exists in separate memory. Whenever you are creating an object reference, whenever you're creating an object, if I want, whether I need a separate memory or whether I need a same memory, whether I need a separate memory or whether I need a same memory. If I need a separate memory, then we are going to create a instance component. Whether I need a same memory, then I am going to create a static component. See, the component which exists separately for each instance of the class. So that means when you are creating your own objects for your class, so that's called as your instance. I want my own memory to be get allocated for that method, for that attribute, for that constants, or for that anything. If I want to have own memory, so then you will be creating your instance. But so that means each object's the instance component will be available separately. That means each will have its own memory. These are referred by using a symbol like this. These are referred by a symbol using like this. Now, coming to the static, these components that exist globally or fixed fixed for all instances, or fixed for all your instances. So that we will be calling it as your static component. So whatever the methods I want to contains only the fixed memory to be allocated. The memory should not be bifurcated. So then you will be going to create it as your static component. Now, when you create a multiple objects for that, but the memory for that static component will be the same across every object. Every object creation, the memory will be the same. Now, in real time, which one you will be creating it? Just give me 1 second, guys. Now, coming to the static, so as I told you, this will have a fixed memory in case of all your object instances. Now, which one you will be using mostly in your real time? Mostly we will be using the instance components only. Mostly we will be using the instance components only. But if you say the constants declaration, that memory will be fixed. The data declaration, you can change your memory wherever you want, but the constant declarations are fixed. The same way, the static is fixed across your all your object references, whereas instance will be having its own memory whenever you're creating this components. So you have to decide whether you want to go ahead with your instance or whether you want to go ahead with your static. Now here, when I go to my ABAP class, if I go ahead and create a attributes, if I go to my attributes, so you can see the visibility. You will be having three things. So one is your instance, one is your static, and the third one is your constant. So I'll be telling you the constants at a later point of time. So one is your instance and one is your static. In the same way, when you go to your methods, you can see the level. So here you can see whether it's an instance method or your static method. You won't be having a constant method, so you will be having this shoe. So that's why I have just provided those two things. Whether you want to create a instance memory or a static memory. Even for your data declarations, also you can do it whether you want to provide it as an instance or whether you want to provide it as static. Okay, so that means how can you allocate your memory? You can do it on your own. You can do it on your own. That is possible only in your classes. That is not going to possible in case of your normal traditional way of your program. You can't able to separate your memory. But here it is possible that you can able to separate your memory. So this is called as your levels. The next one is so class component, the constant, these are some fixed values which will be used in your class that I will be telling you. Next, coming to the next one is the visibility of your attributes or your methods. So that means security, whether I can expose this method or attribute outside of your class. So I have a method or I have an attribute. I want to expose this method or I want to expose this attribute outside. So in your function module, all your parameters will be exposed to outside. In your function module, all your parameters, whatever you have created, it will be exposed. Or whenever you create a function module, everything will be exposed. Everything will be exposed like a public transport. Whoever wants, they can use that one. But whereas in your classes, you can provide the security by providing a visibility. So whether I can able to visible this to the outside or not, whether I can able to visible this to the outside or not, this is the main thing when you are going with your class. In this visibility, you will be having three things. One is your public session, one is your protected session, and one is your private session. So next, coming to your public. So public, when you create this as public, it can be accessed by everyone. Everyone can able to access this. So inside your class, you can able to use this. Outside of your class, you can also able to use this. So like you are, if I say who, so if a person has come, general person has come up, so where you can provide the access either to your veranda or your hall, you will be just providing the access. Can you can go into the bedroom? All right, it doesn't have the access. So which area you want to provide your access? And even in your office spaces, if you go to the office, now if I say if you're coming to version 80, you can directly come here to your ABAP room, but can you go to your finance room? Can you go to the basis room? All right. So this is public for you. Only the ABAPers can have an access to come inside this class without any restriction. For the other persons, they have to consult me to come into it. So that's the security you can provide. So if you say public, so the general corridor of version 80, everyone can able to access. Or the lab which is there in version 80, everyone can able to access. That is called as your public session. Public. So now if I want to expose the method or a data declaration, so wherever I require, then you have to create it as public. The next one is your protected session. So now so protected session is nothing but you can use that in your class and you can use that in your child class. You can use that in your class as well as you can use that variable in your child class. Like if you say you are the person or your family members has been came into it or your cousins, so they can access the bedrooms. The outside people can access the bedroom, no, but they can access the bedroom. But you can access the safe lockers or anything, no. That is your private, your own space. So which no one can able to access is called as your private. For public is generally everything. Protected is your and your subclasses can able to access it, or like your family members or some other persons can able to access this. So who has an access to your class, they can access this. Private is only for you. That means when you create a private, You can only access this inside your class only. You can't able to call them anywhere. You can't able to call them outside. But the only one person who can able to call the private class, the private methods or private attributes is your friend class. Friends, they can able to you can able to share whatever you want with your friend. You will be sharing your secrets and everything. Same way, the private attributes can only be accessed by your friends. Only by your friend class you can able to access. This is called as your friends. If you provide this as your friend, then the private attributes of the class can be called in your friend class. So that's the most important interview question. I have a private attribute. I want to call them in my child class, or in my I have a private attribute in my class A. I want to call that private attribute or private method in my class B. How can you do that? So you have to assign this class B as a friend class in class A. Then you can able to access the private attributes or private methods. So this is one more interview question. So this is the levels which are there inside your class. These are the levels which you have inside your class. Now see the interview questions. What are the different types of your class we have? Global class and local class. So this is one answer. There is another answer also there. What are the different types of classes you have? You will be having a class called as normal class, persistence class, uh, abstract class, and you will be having an exceptional class. Exceptions classes. So like how you are creating an exceptions in your function modules, the same way you can go ahead and create a class exceptions. Now, what is the syntax for creating of your class? Class name definition and class, and then class name implementation and class. What are the levels of your attributes? So you will be having static, instance, and constant. So what is meant by a instant component and a static component? Instant component will have its own memory whenever you're creating an object reference into the class, and whereas static is nothing but your global memory. Okay, so then what are the visibility of your components? So public, private, and protected. So public means everyone can able to access. That means in the class you can able to access, and even the outside of your classes you can able to access. Whereas protected is inside your class you can able to access. In your child classes you can able to access, but not outside. So whereas coming to the private class, only inside the class you can able to access. But if I want to access the private methods in my child class, then what I need to create, that I need to assign it as your friend class. Your friend class, then only you can able to access the private components. Now, how can you differ if it is a static or an instant, either by single arrow or by equal to and an arrow mark? So this is what your classes is. Okay, in a high level. Now tomorrow we are going to see the example of your how to create the global class, how to create your local class, and we will be going and creating a data attributes, and we will be going and creating the methods. How you can call that methods in your program is what I am going to show you in your tomorrow's session. In this, the next one is inside your methods. Also, you have different types of your methods. In that, you will be something you will be seeing a abstract method, the constructor, the interface method. Abstract method, the normal method, the abstract method, the constructor method, and an interface method. In this constructor, again, you have two types of constructors. One is your static and one is your instance constructor. The level is the same. So how you are going to call the constructor? How you are going to call the construction? The constructor also you will be having so many interview questions, so which we are going to see in your tomorrow's session. So once this classes has been completed, then I will be going to show you how you are going to write the ABAP code in your OOPS. So you will be using a standard classes which I have already provided you at the last. This is narrow casting, wide casting on this one. Singleton class, bench class, yeah. These are some of the things. CL underscore GA underscore custom container, CL underscore GA underscore grid, CL underscore GA underscore splitter container. So these are the two important things. So first of all, you have to create a container and you have to expose your ALB. To expose your ALB. If I want multiple ALBs to be displayed in one single report, you have to do your splitter container. So I have provided you, I'm going to provide you the examples for each and everything. At the last, we are going to see a friend class, a singleton class, and you're going to see something called as your wide casting and narrow casting. And then what is the difference between your wide casting and narrow casting? I just provide you to the example for your wide casting and your narrow casting. So in depth, if I want to show you, this is also one more standard which I have created. I have just provided this. I just provided this. You can go ahead and read this one. So everything I have provided this. So in detail, you will be seeing about this. So the document, if you see, only for classes, I have created 26 pages without example programs. Without example programs, this is 26 pages document. So this is most important thing. Everything I have covered this. So kindly make sure to use this document again. Okay. So everything, even the interview questions, everything will be there in this. In tomorrow's class, we are going to see how we are going to create a class, how we are going to declare a types declaration, how we are going to create a data declaration, how we are going to create a method, and how you are going to write down the logic in that method, and how you are going to call that method in your ABAP program is what I am going to show you. And then we will be going and starting with your constructors. And we will be going and starting with your constructors. Okay, the types of your constructor. So what is meant by this constructor and what are the types of your constructor? What is meant by your static? So what is meant by your global constructor, sorry, instance constructor, and what is meant by your static constructor. Okay, so then we are going to see, once this is completed, we are going to see something called as your see the interview questions on your constructor. My interview questions on your only on your constructor. I have created this. The next one we are going to see about your interface. So this is what your interface is. So what is meant by interview question, and then we have seen you about your polymorphism and inheritance. And once this is done, I have written down the interview questions. I have written down the interview questions, and then method overloading and method overriding, which is the concept of your interface only. So once it is completed, the final thing is your abstract class, and that last. So how to create this abstract class? When I was telling this abstract class or in the inheritance, then I am going to tell you about your final class too. So after this in abstract class, I think I have already written the interview questions for this too. So then final class, and what are the event, singleton class, persistence class, white casting, and front class. So this we will be going to see at a later point of time. So this is all about your classes. Okay, clear with this? Any other questions? Any other questions, guys? That's all for today, and we'll meet you tomorrow at the same time, 9 o'clock, and we'll continue our session. Before I signing off for today, any other questions? So Lavanya, you do have a question, right? So rest of the team, if you don't have any questions, you can drop off. And I'll be continue with Lavanya's question. Let me stop the recording.